Gotta come clean with you guys. I've been demoing or reviewing these speakers for months. And maybe I should flat out say enjoying them for months, because it's really been a joy to have these in after the build was all complete. And I know a number of you have came across in the comment sections asking, when is that review coming? Is it ever coming? Do I have a plan to do it? And yes, I did the whole time. It's a 3-part build series that you guys can check out if you missed the first 2 parts. And this is gonna be the final, talking about everything that went on with it, as far as just lightly touching on how the build went, kind of what to expect, and really getting into the sound qualities that people want to hear about on this speaker. Reviewing speakers does kind of end up being a lengthy process for myself. I really try to take my time with these. A lot of times I'll have a speaker in place for, months at a time, and sometimes I'll switch gear in and out, things like that, but I really want to hone in on it and really not miss anything. And I try to do this with all the equipment I have in, if at all possible. I don't like to try to get something in and rush it out in a week, because it's so easy to miss things as far as usability, just, the little odds and ends that could be missed if you only give things a quick glance. And I want to give you guys, the consumers, a really good idea of what to expect when you're shopping these kind of things. Also, I want to bring up that CSS is having a Black Friday sale. So if you guys are interested in any of the DIY kits beyond this one, everything is 10% off right now on the site. So go ahead and check that out too. I wasn't really sure how I wanted to start this review out. I wanted there to be sort of a gauge for you to know if this would be something that you'd be interested in. And the simplest, easy question right away, and something that really sticks out with these, is that base authority. The base authority on these, it's gonna be deeper than a lot of the mid-size floor standing models, but it comes in a small package. And I can easily guess that this would be something that a lot of you would be interested in. These speakers are not particularly big. It's not a small bookshelf, but at the same time, it's not a floor standing model in disguise either, like the Lintons. The baseline you get from these would lead you to believe that you're dealing with something much more substantial than what meets the eye. Especially if you weren't looking at these, I highly doubt you would expect that this would be a bookshelf speaker. First impressions for most people are gonna be that deep and well-defined bass. It's clean, sharp, and it kind of hits you right in the feels. The highs are exactly what I expected here. It's a calming top end that lets you sink into the music. If you're looking for extended highs and sharp corners, I would just, suggest that you look elsewhere, because this just isn't where that one lives, in my opinion. This is the speaker that'll impress the non-audiophile bystander, as well as the enthusiast types that are likely watching this video today. It does the right things in the right spots and really opens you up to long listening sessions without ever having to grab that remote to, tame certain tracks that can really tire a person over time. Going a little further into that, the sonic characteristics make this an excellent speaker for really all genres of music. I like to cover this because certain speakers, well, just won't do that. Certain designs can really highlight all the things that we want to avoid in some of the lesser quality recordings, that we still like. We like the albums, we like the songs, but we may just not like how it's presented on some speakers. This speaker really isn't like that at all. It's sort of the doctor in this area. It doesn't highlight the faults with such glaring detail to the point, increased volumes or long listening sessions wear a person down. I think I honestly can say it actually improves the sound of some of these tracks, especially in comparison to anything that wades into the waters of ultra detailed. Ultra detailed does have its place with me. It's enjoyable for some of the shorter listening sessions, well-mastered tracks, and in some cases home theater, but it's just not something I want day in and day out. The 1TDX gives you all the detail you need without really ever feeling like you're missing out on anything. It's almost like it does everything else so well that it never really crosses your mind. So we started this off with high praises and everything like that, but not everything is gonna be perfect, and that really shouldn't surprise anybody. Speaker building is sort of like finding the compromises that you're comfortable making. And I'm gonna cover where I felt that they made a few of these compromises and how it might affect you. And perfect to me is not gonna be perfect to you as far as like sound profiles go. But we'll get into all of that once we get into the sound portion, like I said. I'll lay out all the areas that it excels, some of the considerations, and just things you need to keep in mind on a speaker like this. So if you've never built a CSS kit, I wanna let you know kind of what to expect. Well, you order these in complete kits, generally everything included. You don't have to though, but I'll get into that here. My recommendation is to go with the flat pack enclosure, the MDF version, and all the components for $934. If you already know that you want the upgraded crossover like I have here, just do that now. Otherwise, you can get the standard now, save some money, and upgrade down the road if you like. Maybe you want to go with the standard parts, put that money towards something else. Down the road, you want the new crossover. It's a simple kit where you can just install that later on. There are two other options as well. One is getting it without the flat pack and saving some money at $774. That's kind of if you have the tools and the space. If you're comfortable with building and looking at schematics, it's not a difficult design, but it will require you to have more tools than some of the other options here. The other one is to go with Baltic birch, and that comes in at $1,024. You might go that route if you don't plan to veneer it. You can finish that in various different ways. My suggestion would be to just go with the MDF version. Get the complete kit. It's built so well that it's honestly the way to go. And the MDF keeps you open to paint, veneer, all those kind of options. It's really limitless when it comes to finishing this. On the topic of those flat packs, they are CNC cut flat packs. Everything just kind of goes together like you'd expect. It's like a puzzle. This enclosure will actually sit together without any clamps on it. That's how well it's cut. It's just gonna require some minor sanding here and there to get things perfectly flat for when you wanna do veneer, paint, that kind of thing. Paint does require extra work, but that's kind of an entirely different topic. I tend to use all the tools, all the clamps. If you look at mine, I'll slap about 50 clamps on there. It's kind of like the dad equivalent of you put all of your ratchet straps on something on the back of your truck, give it the old slap and say, that ain't going anywhere. That's kind of how I put together my enclosures. But in all reality, you could do it with something as simple as painter's tape. The glue is, once that bond forms, it's actually gonna be stronger than the wood. So just get everything closed up. You're really gonna be okay with next to no tools. Even just a few clamps and it'll be no problem at all. The crossover is basically a paint by numbers system. They give you a nice board, so it's always gonna look really good. You just match up the A's, B's, things like that. They'll supply the jumpers. And I give some tips in the build series. I have a couple build series out there on the Tories as well as these 1TDX. And I cover just some of the simple basics of soldering, things to look for. And it might give you some ideas on just how easy this is. It's really not challenging. Finishing these can be as hard as you want them to be. I like to get a little bit wild with my designs. I mix in veneer, paint, sometimes shapes, if you look back at the Tory build series I did previously. On this one, I went with a curly maple veneer, and then I actually dyed it black, and then I sanded it down a bit so that it would highlight the curls, because you get kind of a three-dimensional look with that. It's kind of like a guitar finish, and then I used a rub-on oil to really highlight all of that I was working on. And then the baffle, I had that painted separately, and I actually used spray cans and was able to get a pretty perfect piano black, high gloss black finish on that, which does take some effort. You have to, have it painted very smoothly. You have to then clear coat, and then that will require some wet sanding and some polishing. I go over all that in my previous build series as well if you want to just see how that all happens. But you don't have to go as crazy as this. I like to dedicate a lot of time to the finishing, but you could just keep it as simple as leaving them MDF if you wanted. You could throw some paint over that. It's not going to look quite as polished and commercial that way. Or, even the person who just uses the, Duratex, that material that a lot of people use in sub-enclosures. It'll hide a lot of the faults, but like the others, it won't quite have a polished look to it. There's all kinds of options. You can make this as easy or difficult as you want it to be. It's just a lot of fun to experiment and try out the different finishing techniques you can do here. If you're new to DIY or woodworking in general, something to keep in mind is all woodworkers, we do make mistakes. Half the time it's kind of figuring out how to cover up your last mistake to go into your next one. But the best part about this is you can always fix something with wood. It's really not a problem. You can always sand it, you can fill it, you can change directions and how you want to finish it. And if you're using veneers and things like that, you're almost going to cover up any of those mistakes anyways with the veneer that you apply. So don't worry about, if you're going to make a mistake on this build and will it look good. If you put in the effort, you're going to get the rewards behind it. It really won't be that difficult, and there's so many great tutorials online for ideas on how to, finish these really simply. Before we get into the sound in just a minute here, I want to discuss the value and the various ways to look at it with these. Do I think the 1TDX speakers are a fantastic value? Yes, I absolutely do. I don't think I've had anything in that'll beat them out within their respective price range, but it's not quite so simple. The kit price and the finished price are two different ranges when you consider your time spent. But if it's time spent doing something you really enjoy, should there really even be a cost or time loss associated with it? Finishing the speakers is one of my favorite parts with this. Putting a spin on the design and going as wild or mild as you want. For me, that really doesn't bother me, and the time used there is put into a hobby that I really enjoy, and I think a lot of you guys could too. If you guys could you please send a like, comment, subscription my way? All of that really helps out the channel, as well as opens more doors for me to get in new and interesting gear. Thanks, I appreciate it. Give you guys a little quick room update. A lot of you know from previous videos that I moved into a dedicated space. And really that's gonna give me the ability to make better reviews in a more controlled environment. The problem was I moved into space when it was open, nothing in here, and it really didn't sound good. And I wasn't happy with the performance. So I had to go down the route of, some room treatments, but I wanted room treatments without the, ugly factor that could kind of come with that. I didn't want to give up the design and appearance of the space. So first things first, I went with these wood arc panels. It's the wood panels that look really good. They have the acoustic felt behind them. And something I did to boost their performance was I spaced them off the wall. The felt isn't that thick on these, so it's really gonna only affect some of the, more of the high frequencies, but you do get a boost in performance when you space them off the wall like this. It did really help the slap echo that was occurring in the room, and it also adds some diffusion with the panels themselves. So surprisingly, that made a huge difference to the space, and I have some more items coming. I'm gonna introduce some DIY things, and like I said, I'm gonna try to build it without creating the ugly that's associated with some of this. We'll see how it goes. That'll be coming up soon. Now, finally, we're gonna get into the sound review. These are very easy to review as they match my personal preferences. But as I mentioned before, there's a few things to consider. It's a power-hungry speaker. The more you give it, the more it rewards you. I would shoot for around 50 watts minimum. I connected them to a Cambridge CXA81 Mark II amplifier. I had that one in for review as well. This is about the range I would suggest to get the most out of these. It's not a speaker that likes to be toyed around with. Give it all the power you have available and it'll certainly reward you. These are not the speakers that you throw a 2 to 3 watt tube amp on. You might miss out on a lot of the things that these excel at. As the sensitivity is a bit lower, you might find some of the dynamics are a tad bit lighter at low volumes. Not uncommon, and it's not a major loss, but it can be noted that these really come alive as the decibels come up. If you happen to only listen at low levels, some options would be amps with loudness controls or room compensation. My advice is just to turn them up a bit. You really won't regret it. This is a sub-optional speaker. For my tests, I always start with no subs and really just get a feel for the sound profile and performance as far as the listening tests go. Then later on, I introduce subs into the room. For these in a small to medium-sized room, you may not even feel the need for a sub. Larger rooms, depending on your taste, you may still gravitate to a sub or two. I generally prefer it, regardless of the room size, just for the increased dynamics and deeper extension. Room placement guidelines are pretty simple with these. I ended up around 14 inches from the back wall. That was the sweet spot for the bass output I wanted. In many ways, it's one of the shining features on these, so you have to kind of decide where you want that to fall. I experimented with pulling them further out of the room, and it really did some interesting things with the soundstage and imaging, but did sacrifice the bass output. So play around with it, tune it to your likings as well as what the room gives you. Now going directly into the bass review, judging by what I've already mentioned during this video, you kind of already know what's coming. It's a fantastic speaker in the bass region. The 7-inch CSS LDW7 woofer gives this speaker a full-bodied sound that is a delight for nearly all types of music. It's realistic and even brings a bit of tactile sensation into a small and medium room, which isn't easy without a sub. Like I noted earlier, expect bass performance similar to a lot of mid-sized floor standing models. To get the most out of the bass, give the speakers an adequate amount of power, and you'll notice right away just how tight and punchy these can be. Plenty of attack, nothing really hangs in the air longer than it should. The mids really favor the vocalists. It's a warm, full sound that blends really well with the bass and the highs. It almost presents itself in some ways as an extended mid-range. Female vocals were especially strong. The warm tones give it a little more depth in particular singers. It's musical, engaging, and it's simply a very easy listen for long lengths of time. The treble was pretty much as I expected it to be. The easiest way to put it is, well, kind of slightly rolled off. I appreciate what they did here, just the right amount of detail without ever making you grab for the remote to turn down the track due to sibilance, anything like that, any of the shrill sounds that can really start to get annoying. This is a strange comparison in some ways being a headphone, but this speaker on the highs is sort of like the HD600 or the HD6XX model that is almost like the everyman sound. It does justice to all types of music and really doesn't highlight any glaring faults in the recordings. All this being said, I generally gravitate to a slightly warm sound, so keep that in mind when you're basing some of your decisions here. Another comparison, an older yet wonderful speaker, is the Polk LSIM 703 bookshelf. It shares the really smooth tones and musical delivery, but that one doesn't quite match up to the bass potential that the 1TDX speakers have here. I'm not a big fan of comparing finished commercial options to DIY. It's really hard to put a dollar amount on the labor, but at the same time, it's hardly labor for myself as I do truly enjoy the process. Price to performance on these is a bargain in the audio world. These fall into a sweet spot where you get so much and you're gonna have to spend a fair bit more to get anything like it. Think of this one as kind of like a beginner level build with advanced levels of sound. If you're not interested in the whole DIY aspect of these, but are interested in getting in a pair, they do sell finished versions as well. I have no doubt those will look great too. They have a few veneering options, I think. But if you're at all curious about building these, it might be, just the way to go. Just get the whole thing, try it yourself. I really think you'll be able to get through it. It's a really well-designed kit. When it comes to speaker building, there's not a lot of people out there who can build a speaker, start to finish, all the design, and actually have it sound good, including myself. So why not let someone else do the R&D and get yourself something that punches well above its weight, like the CSS 1TDX. Take care, talk soon. Check out the build series on the 1TDX as well as the Tory if you're interested in some tips or just want to see how these all go together.